Steven, you think they make highlighter color paper? Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and I'd love to call this a preview, but it's just a development announcement of the Canon EOS 1DX Mark III. So we had a call with Canon to go over the specs, to see some images. We can't share too much of that with you, so you're not gonna see a lot of B-roll because this is just a development announcement. But unlike Nikon, who gave us nothing when they announced the D6, Canon has given us a lot of information, as seen here by this highlighted piece of paper, aka my notes. Let's just jump in and tell you that the body is basically the same body as the 1DX Mark II and will still use the same exact battery as before. Now on the back of the camera, I'd love to show you it, but Canon didn't supply us with a picture. There is an AF button that's slightly different than the AF button on the older body. We're not really sure what it does just yet. They told us that it's going to do something, but what it is, we really can't explain to you right now. Speaking of buttons, there are now backlit buttons on the 1DX Mark III. Finally, after 4+ years, they can now match what Nikon did with the D5 and the D4S, and I believe the D850. You will find a new sensor with exactly, I can't tell you how many megapixels because they didn't tell us how many megapixels. I can assume that it's gonna be somewhere in the 20 megapixel range if I had to guess, and there will be a new digic processor which will lead to better high ISO images. Canon went on to say that this camera will have 28 times higher resolution AF points, at least in the center portion. Whatever that means, it's kind of confusing and we'll have to wait to see. I don't even know if it's any different than when Nikon updates their multicam autofocusing system. It just may be a better way of reading the autofocusing points. To go along with better autofocus, Canon says that they have better autofocus algorithms for when you're using the optical viewfinder for shooting or when you're shooting with live view. For those of you who think JPEG files are too big and RAW files are definitely too big, well, you're in luck because this camera will shoot 10-bit HEIF files. Or if you want to shoot these files, you probably shouldn't have spent so much money on a camera and should just use your iPhone instead. So how many frames per second can you shoot with this camera? Canon is saying 16 frames a second with that mirror flipping and flopping out of the way with AF tracking. Now, I don't know if that's true because Canon has a tendency to put some things in parentheses where they say it's 16, but is it really? Or is it 14? Well, in this case, if they're saying that it does do the tracking and 16 frames a second, it's going to be interesting to see if it actually does that, because that is a lot of frames per second with a DSLR. For those of you who wish that this camera was a mirrorless camera, well, you have the option to lock the mirror up and go into live view shooting and get 20 frames per second with AF tracking also. Now that's with the autofocus continually tracking. Is it going to do 20 frames per second? We'll have to see that, because guess what you're giving up when you're shooting with the mirror locked up? Your viewfinder. So you're gonna be somebody on the sidelines holding the monopod being like, yeah, look at the back of this LCD screen. This is such a cool way to shoot. It's not. Get an A9 if you wanna do that. And to add to that, and to add more confusion, they're saying that's with the electronic shutter as well as the mechanical shutter. Look, they're literally trying to make a DSLR that's a mirrorless camera, except put it all together, which just seems to confuse me in so many ways. Here's something I can get behind. Dual CF Express card slots in this camera. That's gonna give you a much larger buffer capacity, which becomes more important when we get into the video specs. But finally, somebody has gone to dual CF Express cards. Will Nikon do that in the D6? You do have dual pixel CMOS AF that is covering 525 selectable autofocusing points when you are in live view. That should mean that this is in essence a mirrorless camera when you shoot in live view. We know that it's a mirrorless camera when you shoot in live view, but will it be effective to be able to use the dual pixel AF and still shoot and track even though you're not shooting the quote unquote traditional way, aka the proper way? Like this, not like this. There will be better connectivity with built-in Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. and there is no mention of IBIS anywhere in the presentation that we saw, which leads me to believe you probably won't be seeing IBIS in this camera or in the Nikon D6. Now moving on to the video section of this camera, Canon says, and I quote, "Best movie shooting performance in EOS history," or as some people want to say, EOS history. You can do 10-bit 422 4K up to 60 frames per second internally, as well as with C-Log. You can also record RAW movies internally, which is a big freaking deal for a DSLR, or any camera for that matter. So how much is this camera, Steven?
We don't know.
We don't know because they didn't tell us, but if I had to guess, I'm gonna say somewhere around $6,800. So basically, this is going to be the greatest Canon DSLR in the history of ever. That's right, ever. And it's probably going to be the last DSLR, the last great pro DSLR from Canon. I do suspect that a lot of sports shooters for the agencies and for the Olympics are going to still continue to stay with the DSLR because they don't want to go to an A9, though there is a lot of mirrorless tendencies inside of this camera. Let me jump in here real quick and say the images you're seeing right now were taken with the Canon EOS 1DX Mark II and edited using FroPack 1. Now, if you're looking for a great starting point or to speed up your RAW workflow, we created 14 custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/presets. Over there, you can play with the sliders to see the before and afters. And if you decide to pick them up right now, they are 40% off for a limited amount of time. Now, Canon had 3 news updates for their mirrorless cameras, starting with that they are working on future high-end EOS Rs plus new sensors for their mirrorless cameras, working on IBIS as well as new RF lenses, which leads me to 2 RF lenses. One, the 85DS, which we already knew about, is priced at $29.99, which is $300 more than the 85 1.2 RF. And the most important lens that we've all been waiting for to finish up the Hebrew Trinity of RF glass is the 70-200 2.8, which will not have internal zooming. It has external zooming, but internal focusing will be priced at $26.99, which actually isn't that bad when you consider the Nikon 70-200 2.8 f mount is $2,800. But that begs the question, do you buy the 70-200 2.8 version 3IS for $2,100 and adapt it to your EOS R cameras? Or do you spend the more money and get the smaller, more compact, probably sharper 70-200 2.8 RF? I'll leave that one to you. I'm personally spending money on the RF, but if you don't need to spend the money on that because you have the version 3, then just go with the version 3. So that's a lot of stuff. We will get you a preview, hopefully a real world review, as soon as we can get our hands on a real production camera. There's no word on price and no word on when it will be released, but if I had to guess, it's going to be in 2020. That's when I think it will be released, in the first part. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.